What is up? Happy Friday, YouTube. Welcome to the game on Pax8 Live. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're watching, you haven't subscribed, you're going to miss next week's show, including Technically Unraveled with Chris and Fehrenbach. Today, we're talking about data privacy, risk, and all kinds of fun shenanigans. So let's dive right into the news.
All right, Dom, it's great to see you again. We're now a couple of Fridays in a row. It's
I
awesome.
know.
We've got some great news to go over. I don't know if it's great news. In fact, that might be a misnomer. I don't know if anything we do
It
like
is
this is usually
news.
great news.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
just
news. It's
news.
nondescript
Yeah.
news. So the first article we have here, if you'll take us over to that, Danielle, I appreciate it. So we have this article about Russia-linked Cold River APT. So this is a great example, and we haven't actually defined APT before, but advanced persistent threat. And typically when you see APT groups, they're either going to be financially motivated, as in we likes the dollar bills, yo, or it's going to be nation state or in any other way type of espionage related from a intellectual property perspective or an overall government perspective. And so we've seen that this Russian-linked Cold River APT has targeted 3 nuclear research laboratories in the United States during this 2022 summer. And so they're finally linking that back, which is really tough. Attribution in this world around cybersecurity is a pretty tough thing to do. But if you have people coming out confidently saying that, it looks like they are looking at attacking the nuclear secrets and or mapping more and more of the infrastructure aspect of our world and what we do. And just a reminder that these games are sometimes related to very dedicated and intentional actions for data, and MSPs serve these worlds, right? Dom, I'd like to ask you this question. You've never ever seen a nuclear facility in some form where somebody might have been representing them and asking for services, right? That's never happened in the never have I ever,
Definitely
correct?
never. Yeah, totally. No, I'll be blunt. We have seen it, right? And it's kind of terrifying, and it's honestly why you'll see me not have many bad things to say, at least about the spirit of CMMC and the fact that it's expensive and the fact that it can be tricky to adhere to. We need that. These are the level of secrets that are being protected sometimes, right? Or
Yeah.
um, the combination of the right amount of data creates that level of secret. So it's the impact on stealing nuclear secrets, as we could imagine, could be quite significant. Right now, these are
Yeah.
probably for energy purposes, or they're there's the recent breakthroughs in fission, but or fusion rather. Um,
Yep.
but nonetheless, I think if you're serving in this space, understand that this is the risk. This is who targets these types of entities or nation states,
Yeah.
and they tend to have infinite budget and time to just work on a specific target if it's juicy enough for them. They're not a crypto gang after a quick buck, right?
Yeah. That's actually a great call out, Dom, because I think when we think of what our intention is as an MSP or as a security practitioner in general, right, it's about elevating risk and reducing risk, making decisions on things that we can do to protect ourselves, and keeping in mind of the most recent threat landscape and all of those pieces that go into a healthy cybersecurity program, right? But it has to be based on the risk and the threat that's in front of you. And I think what we're
Right.
seeing here is sometimes when you touch certain things, military plane parts, down tier manufacturers, Nuclear Regulatory Commission people, CGIS, there's other ancillary value that makes them have a higher risk because of the threat actor's capabilities. And what I love that you called out is if I'm going to be a financially motivated threat actor, I'm going to want to have a return on my investment that makes sense. The least time I spend, the most return for that time, I'm going to do those actions first and foremost. But when you start thinking about military APTs or government linked APTs, they don't. They're a soldier. They're a person told go do X and do it as long as X takes to get Y. And that's a very
Right.
different thing to defend from, right? So, anyways, don't want to belabor the point. Let's jump over to the next article that we're going to go through here real quick for me, please. All right, so here we're talking about this statement that's made by Zurich CEO or Zurich Insurance Group CEO that said or postulated, are we at a point where insurance of cybersecurity events will be uninsurable? Cyber events will become uninsurable. And it's this argument, and I'm not saying he's right, or I'm not saying that it's exactly going to be the way this plays out, but I would say that you're starting to see evidence at the very top of people understanding we can't have negative returns on premiums for too long. We can't continue to take these massive events with no hygiene and no protections in place against an actor that's ever more sophisticated and ever more dedicated to the financial extraction of money from this system, right? And so you get into this point of, will it be uninsurable? I personally do not agree down the road. I think we will bring things in alignment and get classes of insureds and have the abilities to say, you're not insurable, but others are. Right. And I think we're going to head down that road over time. But what are your thoughts on this real quick, Dom? Because we have a big one to talk about towards the end of this segment. So
I think this is thought provoking, and I genuinely think that's Dan's intent here when he wrote this, was to provoke the thought, because it is absolutely on the track to become uninsurable. Like, imagine if 97% of drivers were intoxicated every time they drove. You could not get insurance. It would not be a thing. Right. So
yeah, because the others would be affected by the Agario effect of all the other cars that are drunk. Right.
Yeah, and we're in a world where less than 20% of corporate identities in the cloud have the most basic of protections like MFA. Right. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. Now, I agree, though. I think if we get to a point where we have the right things in play at some level of globality, whatever the word is, like, it needs to be somewhat consistent. Yeah, that's my new word. It's going to be somewhat consistent across the insurance space, where it's, hey, we're using frameworks, we're doing this, we're doing that. Then you're right. There's uninsurable classes, and there's somewhat insurable classes, and then there's highly insurable classes, right? Just like if you screw up when you're driving, you got to go get special auto insurance that costs twice as much and has monitoring, or you got to get a blow and go or whatever.
I've never be different known firsthand, but I've heard.
Yeah. So I think there'll be programs like that, but I do think, and I don't think this will happen, but I do think if action doesn't happen at a mass scale, it will become uninsurable. Just cyber insurance will stop to being a thing. And I think that's what this article is trying to provoke.
Yeah, because we're currently in this hardening market, right? And in insurance speak, that means harder to get access to, more expensive, all of the things, right? So it's a hardening market trying to just shore up the losses, right? But as we go, I think, there could be a case where if things don't change, you're 100% right. We will absolutely be uninsurable, where you couldn't even pay enough premiums because you'd be paying, think of it this way. Even though I'm 100 and I could go get insurance, the market has corrected to say you're going to die within the next 2 years. It's going to cost you $112,000. Why? Because they still got to make their VIG, right? So you get to a point where you might be insurable, but the number is going to be more than the insurance, right? There will be built-in premium, if that makes sense. But I'm being a bit facetious in how that works. But the point being, we're starting to see that play out. So let's go on one more. I want to talk about how this impacts the physical world when cyber starts affecting OT. I went to lunch with a friend of mine, Sam, who's going to be on the show down the road here, and he's the new cybersecurity advisor to CISA in Region 7. And he said one of their biggest fears right now is, what if I just, instead of ransoming you, start locking out your OT? What if I start locking it so you can't come into your office? What if I make it so you can't start up your bulldozer? What if I make it so you can't make your dump trucks go? What if I make like those kind of conversations of that OT exposure and what it does to the world? Well, let's talk. Here's one of those. So the Royal Mail in the UK has told people they can't send post abroad due to a cyber incident. You now have a physical reaction, just like your globality. This is the physicality. I didn't make that one up. That's real, but I just felt like it was appropriate. So they're saying you can't send mail now. It's stopping flow of mail. And even though the FAA at this point is not a cyber event that they say, it still impacted the ability for every plane to take off for about 24 hours, including a UPS plane and FedEx planes, and all of that cargo that's going air now gets delayed, and you stop actual economy, right, from some of these things. So just keep it on your mind. This is becoming a more and more aware problem by governments everywhere. You can't tell me the Royal Mail being down doesn't get several people in legislatures' attention around these conversations, right?
Perhaps.
So what are your thoughts on this, Tom? What are you thinking? You think we're heading towards
this really drives home? I'm going to flip this on its head just because I've been in this world and talk about cyber warfare and terrorism, right? Imagine your ransom example. I'm going to lock you out of the office. What if I lock you in the office and then open some gas valves, right?
Yep.
Like, that's the flip side of this. And that scares me a lot more than the financial motivation of OT attacks. We saw the incident in Florida where they tried to tweak the water supply. Yep. Those types of incidents.
There was a gas attack on an oil refinery There was a gas attack in similar fashion where they tried to move the OT in an oil refinery in Saudi Arabia to blow up the plant. Now, it didn't happen. They actually had some physical fail safes in place that stopped it. But imagine, right? And to your point, so
Right.
we won't beleaguer this. I want to get about something really real that I've heard from a couple of my friends is happening. I want to start real quick before we pull up the article and talk about the egregious 11. So CSA, or the Cloud Security or
Alliance.
what is that? Alliance. Thank you. God bless.
Alliance.
I'm sorry, CSA.
You
So
got their
CSA,
certification. Come on now.
I know several of them, and I'm on working groups with them.
Yeah.
But they have a conversation about the egregious 11. And what it is, it's meant to be the top 11 ways you die a cloud death. It's really meant to be the cloud type focused attack vector, and they kind of matriculate that every year. But the egregious 11 has one on there called cloud abuse. What is cloud abuse, Dom, as you understand it?
So it's pretty straightforward. It's actually a very simple attack. So let's say you spin up an environment in GCP. And I'm picking GCP for a reason here, but like, let's say you got a GCP account,
which
right?
is Google Compute Platform, just for everybody. That's just
Google's cloud.
Yeah.
So you spin up an account there, you run some corporate resources, then I get access to that account. Now you didn't bother to put MFA on it or do anything like that, maybe set up some alerts. So what do? I go find some really juicy machines, right, with the right processing power, spin up 50 of them, and just start mining coin, right? That's the most common. Now you can do other things with them. You can host, website takeovers have been a thing.
Let's focus on the crypto mining. Why does the crypto mining matter more than
stand 50 of those up, and I start mining, and in about a week, I've probably spent $150,000, $200,000 of your money mining Bitcoin or some other coin for myself, right? And that's cloud abuse, right? Now, on top of that, depending on what you have in that environment, it's now been breached. So if you got a big old SQL database of patient data in there, assume it's all breached, right? So it's nasty.
Yeah. And that's why it's on the egregious 11, and it's cool to use the word egregious. So I got to do it several times today. It makes me very happy. Cool word, but the point I want to bring up is Microsoft has taken some defense, and on the 12th of January, they wrote this article. So this is only just a couple of days old, 1 day old. And it says they wanted to take a stance on cloud abuse. And the reason is they're seeing it. And this basically, if we get down to the very boiled down aspect of it, Microsoft essentially said, hey, you're responsible for this. Right. And it says essentially, if you're the person that owns this, you own this risk and you will be the one that has to pay for this. And so I want to bring it up today because my real ask, if you're watching this later, I don't care. You need to ensure that if you take out an Azure subscription or a Google subscription or an AWS subscription or any subscription of compute resources that can be expanded or de-expanded, you need to have adequate notifications to say, I just had a big change. This isn't good, first off. And you need to have MFA, and don't allow users to turn off MFA, and don't use admin accounts so that you can't have a daily driver become the answer to turning off MFA. And so the point I'm trying to make is if you own this risk, Microsoft will make you pay it. Google will make you pay it. AWS will make you pay it. You really, really need to have some things to protect yourself, because if you go down to your client and say, hey, client, I need you to pay for this, you're going to have a much different conversation about that from a fiduciary responsibility. So I'll get off my high horse on this one, y'all, but this one's really, really big. It's really, really coming. And there's not a lot of really good controls in place that can help fix that.
That's your action item, right?
Yeah.
Like go audit every single Azure or whatever subscription. You also got to think, like, are you playing with resources in DigitalOcean?
Is there an IaaS company you have access with?
Right. Yeah. All of those, go audit them. Like right now by hand, well, after the show, by hand.
Not till after
make sure that you have MFA on, take advantage of any cost alerting features so that you can be on top of this. Because the bills could be massive. Just go to the Azure calculator and build a bunch of D series VMs, multiply it by 50. That's pretty much what we've been.
And we just want to see you succeed here, right? That's all we care about. So please go do it. Protect yourself. All right, I'm done beating this to death. I'm late on my segment. I can see them shaking fingers at me right now. Let's move forward. We're going to get in with Robin Harris. She has some amazing advice for you on data privacy, which will kick us off in our conversation. And then we'll probably get a legal opinion from our guest on some of these conversations we just had. So
Carl,
join us in a minute.
Let's talk a little bit about privacy, data privacy. GDPR changed the playing field for us. but we've also got California came online, and different states are ramping up, and others are looking at GDPR as probably the gold standard. They're like, well, let's just play at that standard. But data privacy becomes really, really important because as a individual, you know how important your data is and how much damage someone can do if they get hold of your data, because all they need to do is get hold of your data from a vendor. I got an email, oh, there was another breach. I'm like, oh, great. So your data's out there. So they have a little piece of the puzzle, right? The bad guys have a little piece of the puzzle, and they got it from a breach. And then what they do is they complete the picture, social media, all kinds of posts out there, social engineering, and they can put together a really, really good and compelling picture that now they can use to exploit someone who has access to your stuff, or they can use it to trick you. So the whole thing about data privacy is we all treasure our own data. So we need to start treating our customers' data like it's our personal data, like with that much care. And one of the things companies don't think about, and I'm always going to go back, when you're small, do this. When you're small and you're starting to grow and you're starting to move your data from one system to another, and you're integrating this with that, and then you've outsourced this, so this piece of the puzzle is handled by one of your partners, you need to keep track of where your data is, where it goes, what happens to it. Because anywhere in that chain, if something goes wrong, you're going to be scrambling, trying to find out how to stop the bleeding. So if you've got it all mapped out, and you know there's a problem here, you know where it affects, you know what the upstream processes are, you know what the downstream processes are, you can evaluate the risk, you can put some countermeasures in place. But when you don't know where your data is, you're just going to be kind of like running around like a crazy person trying to figure out what to do. You don't want to do that. So, and then the other thing is, for a lot of businesses, it's the law. It's required. It's required. You know, when we get data requests all the time from the various countries and from, various people, even in the States, and they want to know, where's my data? What are you doing with it? Send me a copy of it. Delete it. Stop using it. I need to change it. So we use a tool for this. This is not one of these things you want to try to do with a spreadsheet or something like that. A tool. So we use a tool for this. It's probably one of the companies that's probably that very high standard on the privacy list, and that's OneTrust. But you really, really, really want to get serious about data protection, because I can guarantee you're going to see more states coming up with their own version of GDPR. You're going to see more states granting consumers. Now, California extended these rights to employees. So because, companies have their employees' data. So what you want to do is, you don't want to wait till somebody tells you have to do it. Just do it, because it's smart, but probably you are operating in an environment where you want to do it because it makes good sense and it's the right thing to do for your customers, for the people you market to, for your employees. It's just good sense to really take care of other people's data.
I think I disagree a little bit with Robin for the first time ever, and it probably will be like the
okay. What
time.
on?
She said treat your customers' data like it's yours. Here's why I disagree with that: is most people do not treat their data right, and they just plaster it everywhere. So Treat
Yeah, that's
treat
true.
their data better than you treat your data, I would say.
That's fair. And I was going to say, I knew I had a sister somewhere that I had lost a long time ago, but I'm definitely separated at birth from Robin Harris on just this understanding of everybody thinks cybersecurity and privacy happen in a vacuum, that they happen in this place where you just pay someone and it's magically secure and magically private. And that's not the case. And so who better to talk about space, it depends, than an attorney? So let's bring in Tyler to give us our space, it depends on some of these topics. And I'd love to start off by introducing Tyler. Tom, if you'll kind of let people know who he is, and then we'll get past that.
I was going to let Tyler introduce Tyler. I mean,
yeah, but we had that whole thing where we didn't know how to say his name, and we were really nice about making sure.
I know you're
so
trying to put me on the spot. Here is what's happening.
Tyler Rauert,
right.
our
Ladies and
VP
gentlemen,
of Corporate Counsel, our VP of Legal, right? He is our oracle and person for that sanctity of understanding these kind of navigable waters, if you will. So, Tyler, welcome to the show. I know you started billing me when you were sitting in the green room, but at least we're here, right? So
that's right. That's right. You're going to be shocked by this bill, Matt, but it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. I think the audience will appreciate it.
One of the things that I'd love to set for the audience is, what's your background, right? You've been an attorney for quite a while, but you had to start somewhere that'll be kind of relevant to this down the road, I think.
Yeah. So I've been a practicing lawyer since 2004, 2005, but my career really started with the first 10, 15 years of my career. I was in counterterrorism. So I took a detour on my career. I started out thinking I'm going to do cross-border mergers, acquisitions. I want to do corporate law overseas, that kind of sexy stuff. And I was in law school on September 11th in DC. So I was in law school in Washington, DC on September 11th. And I happened to speak a little Persian, and I happened to be born on a farm, and I had a certain skill set that was useful to folks. And so I went to work for the Department of Defense, and I was overseas for most of about the next decade or so, working on counterterrorism issues. And that ran the gamut from drugs and negotiating with the Taliban and rebels in Nepal and Sri Lankan genocide and that kind of stuff, down to cybersecurity, cyber risk, bad guys on the internet, that kind of stuff. And then, I came back home at a certain point in my career and landed at Pax8, and now I'm running our legal department here and dealing with terrorists of a different sort.
Yeah. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is there's often a gap, in my opinion, for this overall prosecutorial challenge and legal challenge around cybersecurity, because attorneys aren't cyber people, and they don't understand some of the ramifications or thoughts or processes or opportunities and what goes in on that. And I think what's great about having you here at Pax8 has been just the pragmatism you've had around some of the cybersecurity discussions that have become part of the day-to-day, fortunately and unfortunately, right, for this. So just wanted to set that stage. We're happy as all get out to have you. I know you hate when I call, but we do have some great conversations, and I'm very appreciative of your efforts. So,
absolutely.
All right.
Every time you call, pick up.
I know, and I have to imagine it comes with some degree of PTSD, but maybe not given the history before this. Right? Is the point that this may be small potatoes in comparison? I digress. So, Tyler, one of the things that we're seeing is, in general, our industry has a problem with nomenclature. Our industry has a problem with understanding and really being able to frame some of the concepts that we're talking about. So when it comes to cybersecurity and privacy, I want to first touch on what is privacy. We heard Robin Harris talk about the data and really set the stage for it. But from a legal perspective, we're going to do this in a journey. I want you to paint a picture for what cybersecurity and privacy looked like from a lawyer's eyes, and a bit, Dom, from a technical perspective eyes in 2000. And then I'd also like to look at that in today. And I'd like to look at that in 2025, 2026, and beyond. So just a little bit of conjecture, but mostly some historical thoughts. So Tyler, what would have been the way the world would have thought from a legal perspective about data, privacy, and cybersecurity in the 2000s, in that early time frame?
Right. So call it 20 years ago, right? We're talking really relatively early days, right? Cybersecurity looked a lot like, where's the there may be a data breach, right? People were worried about data breach. And right after September 11th, we were really concerned about critical infrastructure protection, right? And really focused on securing nuclear facilities, the power grid, water treatment plants. We were concerned about folks like Al Qaeda committing sabotage against physical infrastructure, that ones
Right.
and zeros would be used to inflict physical damage in the real world. And then with the occasional,
Got any
sort of use
foreshadowing?
of that's exactly right. With a bit of um, cybersecurity in the sense of data breaches. There have always been bad guys who have been looking to obtain people's personal information and then use that for whatever purposes they may have. Right. That has been there for some time. And so data breach from a lawyer's perspective, we were concerned about what are our requirements for data breach notification for
Yeah.
individuals who may have been
But
impacted by.
But it was very centric, focused on the risk of the organization from the breach itself and the cost thereof, and not, if I'm guessing, just for clarification, at all about really the impact to that consumer from that perspective, right? There was no consumer vote in the matter, if that makes sense. It was considerably.
Yes, yes, that is absolutely correct, and that is a great segue, Matt, into what cybersecurity and data privacy looks like today, because we have made that shift where yes, data breach notification is still there. We're still worried about attacks on physical infrastructure. Again, using ones and zeros to cause damage in the real world, but data privacy law has moved to a different space where we're really focused on the human beings who are impacted by their data or information about them being accessible to people that they don't want to have it. Now, that may be criminal actors on the one hand, or it might be advertisers, right? Like we have seen as data privacy laws have evolved over the course of the last, call it 10 years or so, we've seen much more of a focus of state actors toward protecting people's rights in their own data, where it's a reaction against big data, honestly,
Right.
and using people as a product, people as a commodity, right? Think of it as a reaction against the Facebooks of the world. Like this is really what social media hath wrought, right? Like this is where digital advertising and the creepy stuff like, I'm looking for Christmas presents for my wife, and every time I get on my phone, I'm getting served up an ad for something that.
Oh, I'm fairly certain Victoria's Secrets thought I was a female for like 6 months after a couple of my queries. Like, right? Like I legit wound up on getting some very odd ads that had miscategorized my intentions in that regard.
But no, I used to do a lot of marketing, and I did that tracking, and I learned a lot about it. And the targeting that I was able to do, like I could target Matt Lee without saying Matt Lee or Tyler, because it was I'm looking at attorneys or I'm looking at cybersecurity professionals in this very specific lens and the zip code that also interact with this topic. Like the amount of targeting you can do, and it was all good at that point because it didn't say Matt Lee. It's just everything else about him except his name. Like.
Yeah. But the interesting part about this, and there's a frame, so I want to go back real quick to the past, right? When it came to the past, let's paint a picture though. So what was the legal implication? A breach notification might be the cost of breach notification, some insurance potentially for them for an outcome for X period of time, but there was no punitive aspect. There really wasn't a civil component that played out. Is that a fair approximation of that? So you'd almost consider it Wild West around cybersecurity and privacy in those 2000s or in that 20-year ago period, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And that was largely because governments weren't playing a role in trying to ensure the sanctity of personal data, right? It was really just a matter of you're looking at the impact on your business and the reputational damage that you might have, which is significant, and it remains significant. You somebody who doesn't adequately protect their customers' data then and now suffers reputational damage, and that matters. And you're right, your insurance would be higher for a while, and you might find yourself uninsurable. But there weren't fines. There wasn't necessarily a tangible penalty for you, and that has changed today. You look at the GDPR.
Yeah, help me understand that.
Robin,
go forward.
Right. So the GDPR institutionalized what they call technical and organizational measures. They made it a requirement that companies institute some of the best cybersecurity practices that were around at the time to ensure that if a breach occurred, it was mitigated to the greatest extent possible. They require you to do this. The other innovation that the GDPR sort of brought about was that it wasn't good enough to just protect people's personal data anymore. You have to prove that you are protecting it. It effectively shifted the burden of proof from the government proving that you screwed up to you now having to prove to the government that you're doing all you can to protect data. It just shifted that burden, which I think is probably a good shift.
Agreed. And I think this is where one of the concepts that I talk about, and I've run by a little bit better attorney, but I like to get a second opinion, so sorry, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, seriously, I talk about defensibility. In today's era, under today's world, when you live in this beginning to see regulations, privacy being more about if you lost the data, you didn't do enough to protect the data, you must prove you did. And you start getting into this understanding, there's a legal term around reasonableness, right? And that reasonable person understanding. And so what I tell MSPs a lot today, and maybe guide me on this or change me if you think it's a little different, but your job is really not to protect your client. It's really more to be defensible in the way you've chosen to do so. And it's about being able to say, I have a policy and this is what I'm following. And I have a procedure and that was written to meet this policy's rails. And once I've done that, here's the actions I took. And my job is to explain how reasonable that was in the absence of all the other choices that could be made and all the different things I have to do. While I know that there are no other regulations that drive this, I'm just trying to be better as a steward. And so my argument is that right now, the time of today, especially if you don't get into that corporate, very contractual aspect of this, but more at that SMB and MSP level, I would define that this is the time of defensibility. This is a growing in the legal ramifications of not being able to prove you did something reasonable, not outcome based, right? Yes, the data was lost. Did you do enough to protect it? And was it reasonable? Did you meet due care in that conversation? So what are your thoughts on that, Tyler? I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, Matt, I think you're spot on that what we're seeing in the evolution of cybersecurity and data privacy law is that governments are saying, look, we recognize that bad guys exist. We recognize that there are state actors that have nearly unlimited resources that are going to pursue the goals that they're going to pursue. And there's nothing you can do about it. They're just going to do what, haters going to hate, bad guy's going to bad guy. Yeah. That's just what they're going to do. That's right. That's what makes them bad guys. So, they're out there. Let's stop pretending that they're not out there. And so what states are increasingly doing is requiring companies to think about data privacy and cybersecurity ahead of time. We're trying to extend that security perimeter. That's what we're looking to do is that governments are using laws to force the private sector to think about these matters and to prove that they've thought about it. So that's where your defensibility point comes in. You need to you don't have to stop every bad action from happening before it happens. We can't do it, right? Like the bad guys are going to succeed. We the good guys have to succeed 100% of the time, and the bad guys only have to succeed once for something to happen. So we know they're going to make their way through a perimeter here and there. We're just trying to make sure that we've extended that perimeter as much as we can, that everybody is on this. We, the good guys, are all on the same team, and we're thinking about how to protect our customers and protect that data as best we can. Yeah. That's really what states are trying to do now.
Well, and it comes back to like the argument I made as a kid, okay? As a kid with my math teacher, I would do my algebra problems very rapidly in my head. I could just parse them down pretty easily. And so I'd never show my work, right? And so we're almost switching to the same thing my teacher kept saying of, Matt, sometimes it's the journey, not the result, right? And it's about being able to show that I understood the components of it, that I did it the right way, that it would be repeatable, that it was accurate, that it was. And so when you start talking about it in the lens of cybersecurity, the math problem in showing your work is about not being arrogant and saying, I've got this, don't worry about it, but rather taking people through a very reasonable journey of what they did and documented and proof and showing thought and care and fiduciary understanding of your responsibility of your decisions, right? And some of those things. So I think that's the now of privacy. You're starting to see GDPR, CCPA, as Robin said, and all these things to be able to understand that risk to the consumer. So now it means you have more risk in that front. What about insurance? Let's look at the past in insurance, if you've got any thoughts on that from a legal risk perspective, and now the legal risk of insurance today, just as a bit of a lens, just exposition between the two.
Yeah, I was really happy to hear you guys bring up that Zurich insurance discussion earlier. I think that's on point, and that shows us a bit of this evolution, right? So in the past, cyber insurance was really a matter of, let's be honest about this, the insurance companies didn't know what the hell they were insuring. They didn't really fully appreciate.
Yeah.
Calculated gambling, right? Like that's essentially what they were doing.
That's right. And this isn't to like try to denigrate the insurance industry. They were trying to respond to demand in the marketplace, and I get it. And they were doing the best that they could with the information that they had at the time. But what we're seeing now is that as we gain more information and threat actors become more sophisticated and they become better at what they're doing, and cloud fraud becomes not necessarily easier, but the actors are more sophisticated in how they're able
more
to do
instant.
Exactly. As the threat actors evolve and the insurance industry gains some experience, they're shifting from this idea of like, well, we don't really know what we don't know, and the problems that exist, like, yeah, there could be some significant breaches somewhere, but those are going to be relatively rare. So we think on an actuarial basis, we're going to be able to make money on this. Because remember, insurance is all about making money all the time, no matter what. Like that's just what they do.
Return of premium ratio.
Right.
That's right. So they've evolved from the space where they didn't really understand the industry terribly well to the place where they understand it better now. And so they're a little bit better able to say, hey, you have to do things like enable MFA. You have to have some of the same technical and organizational measures that the GDPR requires. You have to do that not just to follow the law that the European Union has set out or that the California Consumer Privacy Act has set out. But you have to do it in order to get insurance in the first place. So they've sort of moved in that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, but thinking about this also now from the legal risk perspective, I think the shift also has become that they also understand blame better. And I think they also understand subrogable as well as fraud-based risk and are wielding that sword. We've seen evidence of that in this last 10-year, to your point, period. Would you also agree?
Oh, I totally agree. In fact, one of the things that will make, even if an MSP, for example, has great cyber insurance, right? Their cyber insurance policy will say something like, look, if you don't take the very basic security steps, like enabling multi-factor authentication on all of your clients' tenants, we're not going to insure that risk anymore. You have just violated your policy. It's sort of like, a commercial general.
Oh, Tyler, hold on. Hold,
policy.
Tyler. Hold on. Okay. The auditors are out. Keep going. Sorry. Dom's auditors. We don't want to talk about the auditors. It's in privilege. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, it's okay. But they're basically saying, look, if you don't enable MFA, for example, and the threat actor enters the environment and does things that threat actors do, we're not insuring that risk anymore. That is now your fault. It's not, you could have taken a very easy step and you didn't. It's sort of like, you put your 16-year-old kid behind the wheel and they get into an accident, of course your insurance premium is going to go up because there's risky behavior that's going on here. So,
but if
they
you
might
weren't in
not
the
be
car and you let your 15-year-old drive when the policy clearly stipulated you had to be there, you have new risk of you're the one at fault by your proxy of your actions, right? And so you start seeing
That's
that
exactly right.
play out as well. Yep.
That's exactly
All
right.
right.
And they
So-
won't insure that.
Exactly. And they will, in my opinion, start to take actions to uninsure them. It's not a legal term, but the point being rescission of the policy as if it never existed means the claim might need to be returned if they had already paid it out, which is what we did see at
And
least
there's to
before
say
it
that
was
succeeded.
settled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they
Yeah.
settled, right? If you're not familiar with this one, Tyler, there was a case in July from Travelers Insurance where they sued for rescission for saying, you told us you had MFA and you didn't have MFA on this one server. We're going to rescind. Now, they didn't go to trial. It settled out of court, but you can only imagine that didn't settle for free with Travelers, right? I would imagine that was a
Right.
return of some of their $3 million.
Well,
if not all
and
of
the
it.
policy was rescinded, right? So the end
Yes.
goal of Travelers was met. They just
Yes,
and I
that's
think,
true. They did
you know,
rescind the policy.
it was more for the policyholder if you think about it, because you don't want that dirty laundry in a jury trial.
Oh,
I would want dirty
absolutely.
laundry in a jury trial at least.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. And just a general legal point for your audience is you always want to settle a suit when you can, because you can control that settlement. If you get in front of a jury, you don't know what they're going to do. So you would just much rather retain that control if you can do it.
Makes total sense. Which is kind of the point where what we're starting to see, and let's talk a little future, Tyler, because I'm asking you to put on your future seeing hat. But if we believe there's not a lot of legal precedent today, and if we believe that there's not a lot of this existing court decisions that have happened from a jury trial that have turned into X, that have turned into Y, what do you think the future looks like for this next 10 years around the legal wrangling, right? Back to your point of settling something quickly out of court to keep it out of and keep it control. What does it look like when you start seeing all the impacts of privacy and the impacts of insurance and the impacts of regulation and the other things that are coming to play? What does that look like from a future legal perspective in this near future, right? In the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years?
Yeah, I think initially, well, let's start from where we are today and move that out 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So where we are today is a bit of a legal and insurance jungle in the cybersecurity and data privacy world, especially in the United States. So, I work across borders, right? Europe, for everybody's complaints about how restrictive the GDPR is. And I share many of the concerns and criticisms of European data privacy law. But it is much simpler to understand the environment that you're operating in Europe. Yes, there are differences between, for example, Luxembourg and Germany, right? But the GDPR sets a floor that no one may fall below. And so you understand within the continent, within that, those 27, I think it's 27 member states, plus some like Norway, Switzerland, and the UK, you understand what you're getting. You understand how to act. You can set expectations. There's less uncertainty. There's more certainty. In the
Which would be enabling for
States,
business, right? At least in the level setting aspect.
That's exactly right. What business generally wants is certainty. We don't want regulatory uncertainty. I want to know what the rules are that apply to me, and I can then take action to meet those requirements. What we have in the United States is a different environment, or let's call it North America generally, because I tend to love
Canada's
the
very
US and
similar.
Canada. It is, but Canada sort of sits, if you will, between like California and Europe, a bit of a middle ground there. So let's just say that all the provinces of Canada, they have their own rules. All 50 states in the United States, plus our territories, we all have different rules. The most important one in the United States is definitely California, big state, lots of folks. Tech
The Shield
hub, right?
maybe right behind it, potentially,
Right.
New York
That's
Shield.
right.
Yep.
Right. And so those states tend to drive things, but you have new laws in Colorado and Virginia and other places that are also changing the privacy
Louisiana
landscape. So,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So we see a bit of a hodgepodge in the United States. It's our strength and our weakness. You can try out new things, see what works. Our laboratory of
Sure.
democracy is great.
Right.
But I do think what we're going to see moving forward is increasing demand, probably even from the private sector, from the tech sector, to have a federal law in the United States on data privacy to try to unify some of these state rules. Because right now, say there's a data breach, right? We have to read through 50 states' data breach notification rules and what the thresholds are on when we have to notify somebody and how do you figure out where somebody is. It it's maddening how complex it
No,
is in
I
the
think you're
United
looking about
States.
this the wrong way, Tyler. I think what you're realizing is there's a capitalism market that's going to be created to help everybody understand the commonality between the 50
Right.
as they shift and change. Like that's a whole industry. That's a Thomson Reuters for like,
Right.
another sector. So I tease, but yeah, 100% accurate.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right, Matt. But that's where we are. Is that we're in this space of it, kind of the law of the jungle in many
Yeah.
respects, and so there is going to be an increasing push for a federal data privacy, federal cybersecurity
Agreed.
rules. On let's just have it so that we can all understand how we operate in this environment.
Yeah.
If California is driving now, I'm setting my company's data privacy policies to match California because I don't know where everybody is and it's expensive for me to audit that and figure out where everybody is. So I'm just going to say that every American is a Californian as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And
Well, you know
so
what's
if,
funny, real quick on this, Tyler. So you actually have two legal precedents starting to be tried to be go through the Supreme Court, and another one that's still in legislation or in civil litigation. But they're trying to put their muscles on other states in a lot of ways of saying if you produce
Mhm.
pork in the United States and it will maybe be sold in California, you must meet the minimum pork standards in California, which now is this massive
Mhm.
difference. And it's a big fight right now going to the Supreme Court. But then additionally, you have things around cyber where they're trying to influence impact of Californians across the entire United States, whether or not there's even maybe jurisdiction potentially, right? And so you have these, to your point, quagmire of jungle law playing out where a lot of these things are shifting even as we talk about it today, right? Is that fair?
Absolutely fair. And add to it the sort of, I don't know, call it a rap battle that we see between Gavin Newsom on one side in California and Greg Abbott in Texas on the other. And they're just constantly poking at each other and just
A
trying to
rap
mess with
battle.
each
I
other.
love this.
Yeah, like I don't know. This is like a like 2028 presidential fight. I don't know why they're doing this, but they are, and it creates problems for everybody else in between. So there
Yeah.
becomes an opening for ambitious politicians in DC to say, you know what, we're going to step into the breach. We're going to
Yeah.
solve the problem. There's at least an opening for that to try to even the playing field here, which I think the business community would welcome.
Which also then tucks in, right, of this understanding of if we now have these privacy legislations, whether it be in states as individuals or whether it be in the macrocosm of a federal legislation, I think we still have another challenge that hasn't solved today. So let's talk about this. Dom, from a technical perspective, let's talk about where the security of tech, if I am a technician in 2010 or 2006 and I'm working on stuff, what's the difference between then and the way we thought and the way a technician needs to be thinking today? That's a great, I think, thought
Mm.
experiment for you, Dom, from that privacy or
It's
cybersecurity
dramatic.
perspective.
Like that's the only way to put it is it's dramatically different, right? And we talk about this all the time at every Pax8 show. We go back to the model of the walled garden and we draw a picture and it's a box and I've got all my stuff in the box and it's super locked down with my firewall that really wasn't doing anything the whole time. And right, I've got all these things. And as a tech, if I'm an individual contributor, I know exactly what I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for these 15, 20,000 machines on this network behind this firewall. And if I'm a bigger company, I have colleagues that help me with that. Today is wild, and I think Robin touched on it pretty well. Where you have data over here because this vendor helps you process that. Here at Pax8, we just bought a new survey tool to gain customer satisfaction. And part of that process is like, all right, we have to send this data here. We have to make sure their privacy things meet up. And then at our scale, you've got to go into the platform OneTrust you mentioned and log where the data is kept and log all your policies and procedures so that if someone enacts these new rights that you have, ultimately someone's responsible for finding all that data to send it to the person or delete it or whatever. So from a technical perspective, if I'm doing my day-to-day, I think my day-to-day job is more complicated because I'm managing and supporting users on more platforms.
Yeah, but imagine yourself in those shoes, right?
And from a security person, the former shoes, like managing the walled garden.
I mean, you were going there, so I just got you stopped. So I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yeah. So today I'm managing data in all these different places and I'm interacting with it. And then I have to, work with folks like Tyler to make sure that I'm doing things that drive the right company policy. That's not a bad thing. I work with Tyler on this all the time, to make sure that the way I'm handling data is in the right way and I'm using the right tools. 2010, whatever, pick one, 2006 is all on the server, right? It's all in the S drive. And maybe I had an application in there and it was all right there, right? I backed up those 2-3 servers and we were good, right? That's where the data was. And if today's privacy laws apply to office technology of that time, we'd be having a much easier conversation. And I'm not advocating to go back. I love the cloud. But then I just have to go to the S drive and search Smith and be like, oh, here, Mr. Smith, here's all your files and what you asked for on the data we have on you. Maybe I spit a report out of the ERP. That's a much simpler time. So I think today, if I'm someone in charge of, or even just practicing security under or with part of a team, the amount of things I have to look at and have documented to be able to do a comprehensive job of privacy, it's a huge list, right? I think we have a lot of applications at Pax8 and I'm happy I'm not on that team because I don't have to manage data on all those applications.
Here's the other color I'd add to this is that when I was a technician in 2011, I genuinely was doing things for efficiency or for capability gain or for efficacy in some nature, but I don't know that I would argue I was looking at it from a security first or privacy first lens in any fact or fashion at all. So at that consuming wrench turner that I had no idea about the implications of my day-to-day. When I rolled out an RMM, I was about efficiency gain. I didn't care about the other pieces of it in the way I should. But if you are an MSP today, and I know because I talk to them every day, all day, you're starting to have that question. You're now looking at it through the lens of what's the risk, what's my risk to security. But I don't know that I'd say they've even made the jump to a real understanding of the privacy implications of the what should I collect and how do I teach my customers what they should collect and how do I, right? Yeah, you don't have that. So I would define us in a position of we have woken up to the technical aspects of securing things. We've started to see a map. We've gone from the old days in 2000 of me shooting from the hip going, why am I going to use this algorithm for a password? Well, because that way everybody can be different, but we can know them. Well, then to now I'm following a framework. I'm doing a CIS. That. I know. I'm so sorry for it. I hate my heart for it, but go ahead, Tyler.
Well, look, Matt, and some of that is, frankly, not to plug the law and lawyers as the last remaining guild on earth, but it's true. The law has driven some of this change. Like, for example, the GDPR in the European Union requires privacy by design and privacy by default. They are saying, by law, thou shalt think about privacy in your product design, in what you're doing with your customers, and how you're moving data throughout the organization. So now, like when our development engineers or our product team is saying, Tyler, we want to do something new. I say, great, let's think about data privacy and cybersecurity and how we're going to design this thing. And they get so mad at me because I have to be in business and I'm like a kitten in a server just pulling out cords because I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm telling them, guys, we've got to think about privacy. We've got to think about cybersecurity as we're designing this.
Before we go back on this, I have it's hard. Sometimes I get my string pulled and then I just got to go. But here's a just exposition I'd love to kick through. If you are saying privacy by design, and let's say you're a fictitious company called Moogle or something, right? or Icromoft. But let's say you're one of these companies and privacy by design has to be there for the person that's making and gathering that data, right? But what about secure by design as it respects to privacy by design? And what I mean by that is if we've accepted we're going to collect this data and this is well within what we should collect and it's the right data and we're holding it the right way, what if somebody like a Moogle doesn't make MFA on by default? What if they don't create the ability to be secure first and to have to turn off security in its respect to the impact on privacy, in the sense that you set up these practitioners to use insecure by default to meet privacy by default? What do you think? And this
Yeah.
is conjecture. We're not asking for any legal precedence on this. This is the gut punch from an attorney. Do you believe those might have linkability into culpability as
I
this legal jungle plays out?
I absolutely do. In fact, I think this ties back to your cloud fraud discussion from earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You know that if you don't have, if you're not enabling, for example, the privacy and security by design, like if there is a
Right.
design flaw in the infrastructure that you're using, then you are enabling an insecure and public rather than private incident to occur. Like that is precisely what's
It's
happening.
why
And it
buckets
does
now
link
by
back.
default are with security keys, right? They used to be by default public, and you had to change them from public. And so you get into this world of shifting. And I think that's the point I wanted to hit is, if we're looking future of tech, more of these decisions, in my opinion, will happen at the future of tech owner levels, like the Moogles and the Schmicromorphs, right? They will now, it'll be in their best interest, right? It'll be in their best interest to have that on, and you've got to turn it off if that's the way it's going to
Yeah.
work. But I believe you'll see defaults start to shift. That's my prediction on what is that legal impact shift in tech, right?
I think you are absolutely correct. We already see it, and we're only going to see it more. Where we're looking at, who was it? Cass Sunstein, who was in the Obama administration, wrote that book Nudge about human psychology and behavioral economics, where we're talking about setting the default, because people are lazy and inertia is real. And so if you just set the
Yes.
default at the
Static
most
inertia
secure,
too,
that's
right?
that's right.
Yeah.
Right. So you set the default at the most secure, most private setting, and then people can toggle that down if they want to, and then they're at their own risk. But you, as the
They chose it then, and
exactly,
it comes to
and it
choice,
was an
right?
informed choice that they made on
Yeah.
purpose. Then you've eliminated your culpability. You've shifted that culpability. I agree with you 100%, Matt. I think that's where privacy and security are headed in the future.
But so to the
Agreed.
point of the channel, though, is you have to have that conversation at every level. Because if you're the MSP and you're not enabling your customers to do the right thing from a security perspective, they hired you to
True
advise
story,
them
Dom.
and to tell them what's best.
Mm-hmm.
So, Moogle notwithstanding, right, and the secure by design principle,
My cousin
then
owns Moogle.
and I
It's
think
cool.
I think in some ways it's going to roll down to you as an MSP, and we have these conversations in pro services about, are we doing the right things to at least educate on what we should be having our partners do, because we don't want to be holding the bag when something goes wrong, and you should be in the same light of, hey, customer, we have to do this, right? This is not an optional thing, and do it, right? And do that secure by design methodology when you implement what you implement.
Which brings me to the last point I think we can tackle today, right? And I think even in that conversation, it's more about showing the journey of that decision, right? Even if you are saying, Dom comes up and says, hey, we've got this one ProServe thing we do all the time. How do we do this the right way? Do we need to put rails around it? And my argument is that comes in a legal conversation between you and Tyler, right? That is often done in that space. So what does the MSP's day-to-day need to look like to meet that type of a relationship with legal counsel in that regard, right? I feel like that's a cool topic we haven't touched on. We only have just a minute. But what's this shift of privacy and cybersecurity legislation going to do to the legal relationship and burden, to some extent, of MSPs today, Tyler?
Short answer is, it puts you in the crosshairs. It is your responsibility to ensure that you are providing the most secure private environment for your customers and your clients that you possibly can at every point. And let's remember, you have already signed end user license agreements and agreements with software vendors and distributors where you have promised that you will do that. So you're already on the hook to do it. So now it's just implementing what you've already promised to do. Now, you might not know that you've promised to do it because nobody reads that crap except me, but you have promised to do it. And so now it's on you to just do it.
Yeah. And this is the argument for the Brad Grosses of the industry and the channel and those attorneys that are helping to say, let's at least be clear in our SLAs. Let's be clear in our agreements with our customers. Let's have conversations and prove we had them. But at the same time, let's be better at proving we're going to get better over time as well. We've run out of time. Tyler, gosh, this has been amazing. I don't know that I want to pay the bill for it. I've already told Dom I'm going to use his credit card, but I'm pretty excited about having you here, brother. I just wanted to say thank you. Dom, if you want to close us out and tell us what we're going to do next week.
Tyler, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks,
I hope
guys.
it's been an incredibly valuable show for you guys. I think I learned some new legal tidbits on this show. So thanks so much for coming. Be sure to join us next week, same time, same day. And on Thursdays, catch Kristen Fairbach and crew on Technically Unraveled. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that magical stuff that makes our numbers grow. And we will see you next week.